Hi, it's me again. We're on Total Wellbeing today, and as we were discussing last week, alcoholism and alcohol abuse is a very vast topic. We started last week, but we were not able to finish. So this is the extended edition. If you missed out, you can just go watch that and then continue. As usual, I'm here with Dr. Danswa Nuama from Pantang. She said it last time, you can always go there and look for her. She'll be very nice to you because of Total Wellbeing. So we're going for a quick commercial break and we will be back. Do stay tuned. Welcome back from that short commercial break. You're watching Total Wellbeing. I am Jacinta and I am here with Dr. Nuama. We are talking about alcohol abuse. So if you missed out, well, it's not too late. My question was before the break, why do you drink? Why do I drink? Why should anybody drink? So Doc, do you approve of drinking? Why do you think people drink alcohol? Why do we drink alcohol? I'm not talking about water here.
That's a good clarification on water. I don't think I have to approve or disapprove per se, because people are entitled to their choices. However, I think the caution has to be thrown in when there are certain limits that are being exceeded and it's moving to the realm of being unhealthy and being actually a threat to one's health. So why do people drink? Varied reasons. And I think even with our culture, we have a culture where right from we welcome you to your exit, we kind of use alcohol as part of the rites of passage. So you welcome a child.
With gin.
And traditional setting, you kind of use different substances on the tongue, and one of them generally is some alcohol. And then when people are getting married, then there's celebration with some alcohol as well. Funerals, alcohol is in abundance. Any celebration, generally, you would have some alcohol there. So it's something that's part of our culture, our society, how we form, how we work, essentially, how we meet together. Some alcohol in there is there. So
does it mean alcohol makes us happy? Or does... so why have that during occasions and celebrations? Unless it makes you happy or it makes you...
I think it's been in there. Well, our forefathers might tell us why they introduced it, but essentially, you know how it disinhibits people. People are able to feel a bit more, relax, and then kind of essentially seem to have more fun when you're having some alcohol in the system. So it's kind of helped to create a jovial environment so everybody feels we are celebrating. So that might be the aim. But then again, once you start, then sometimes it might become something else for others. So society itself accepts alcohol to a large extent. But then as you said, generally now with its intake, there are some restrictions. So we say less than 18, don't. But we have people still doing so before. And that might bring us to the aspect about peer influence and trying to fit in. So people are curious. Why should I have to wait till I'm 18 before I can actually taste it? What's this that daddy's drinking all the time and I'm not allowed to touch? His Coke I can taste, his malt I can taste, but this particular one, so you're quite curious. People would want to see what's going on, and some might start tasting prior to that period, and some actually start ingesting large quantities before then. So once someone does it at home and he's feeling like he's a cool guy, now, my friends too should kind of, because we are now the cool group. So trying to fit in around that age would come in with such pressure to do some of these things. And even beyond that age, even when we are older. So for me, well, I'm a teetotaler, I don't take any alcohol. I grew up in a family that's a bit religious, so we don't. But then even with work, or, let's say work team says, oh, we are going for a team dinner or a team lunch or something. There will be that pressure, hey, you don't drink. Especially if you're a gentleman too. Hey, are you a woman? You are being equated to a woman. Because sometimes just to try to fit in, some people would then kind of just start taking in some alcohol, just trying to fit in as well. So that's another reason. Then there are those also who might start trying to cope. Life comes in with several stresses. And some people find solace with a bottle or with alcohol. So trying to cope with some things, it's not really a good way of coping, because even if you do get intoxicated, you have your hangover, you come back to, okay, being fine. The challenge is still there waiting to be addressed. But then some people like that temporal disengagement
makes you
from
drown
reality.
your sorrows,
Exactly.
and then after that, the reality is it's still
It's
there.
still
It doesn't
there.
go away.
It's still there. So these are some of the common reasons why people might start taking in alcohol. Some would be able to start with recreational and stay there. However, there are quite a number who would then start graduating because the quantities they are taking in is not doing it anymore. They would have to. Actually, some research has found that there's a genetic component to that as well. So there are some people who would actually that have a increased risk for some addiction. Okay, so for them, the little quantity they will start, they'll realize that they are just really quickly into all the realm of dependence. So for some, you see family lines where they have a lot of people, they'll term alcoholics, you know. So they can point to, oh, this uncle, this, so that means you should just know that you are probably.
So please be advising yourself. If you have an uncle, a father, a grandfather, don't think it's cool.
Yeah, who have done excessive. Then if when your friends are drinking, it looks like they are okay. Yours might not be that case. So you might take just one, and it might spiral out of control. There actually has been a story of a colleague doctor. This was in Nigeria. The Nigerian team shared with us who. Similar. So he also grew up like an SU boy. SU means like spiritual kind of person, you know. So you don't take alcohol. And he was into the field of surgery. So and with surgery, you stand for long periods of hours. It's terrible on the back. So he started having these back issues, and he was taking pain med. But then at a point, he really wasn't too into it because he didn't want to have issues with that as well. But you know, we are all a product of our society. So home, someone says, oh, we have these herbal preparations that can help with the pain. And so he goes for it. No, you know, some of these are herbal medications.
It definitely adds up, yeah.
Alcohol and all that. So he did take it in. He didn't know it had alcohol, but after that, then his issues with alcohol began. And within a very short period of time, he had several complications. He actually passed away as a result of the complications. So the thing is, others might try and be seemingly fine, but you don't know what your predisposition is. You don't know if you are the type where a sip here, there would quickly move you into the realm of dependence. So if you can, why not? Yes, if you can, definitely do. And we'll talk about management later, I'm sure. But that is if you can avoid.
So sad. That is so sad. I mean, it's really sad. Everybody could be doing something, and then you go and do it, and you just. I mean, he lost his life. I mean, how sad is that? So don't follow the crowd. The fact that somebody is drinking 5 bottles doesn't mean you should even attempt to take a sip, because your story could be different. I want to talk about some of the complications that could arise from alcohol. I mean, I hear it's connected to so many other health challenges, and something about osteoporosis, heart disease. Do you want to tell us about that? Is it connected to cancer, diabetes, so that we know that we are, prone to these diseases?
Absolutely. As for alcohol, I always tell people that from the crown of your head to your sole of your foot,
hey, that's a serious matter.
Anything, So I think the brain aspect I have spoken about. So apart from it, individuals even getting some when I say psychotic, I'm talking about the changes in the person's let's say hearing things, seeing things, behavior and stuff. Also, even with memory, as you're growing older, there could be issues with memory and impairments as well, and cognitive, or how we assess ourselves. So after that aspect, I think we've delved in a bit more. But then right from your mouth, tongue, your esophagus, where it will pass through to your stomach, all that area is at risk of being harmed as well. And commonly people will hear about peptic ulcers, amongst others. And sometimes it causes what we call viruses, but then so it might lead to people throwing up or vomiting out blood. So some people, when they come in and ask them, they would have had those experiences. So you have your stomach, then you'd have your liver. Liver effect is one of those that is drastic. Yes, you would kind of pick up quite early. The good thing about the liver is that, sometimes at the initial phase, it's able to repair itself when it's harmed. So you hit it once, twice, it's kind of still trying to handle itself. But then with that repeated sense of injury, then it moves into a realm where you could even end up with cancer altogether of the liver. So it's one of those organs that you could easily have harming and impairing, So, and then we talk about the pancreas, then to reproductive system, your testes of men shrink. So the brain is shrinking, the testes are shrinking.
It becomes a walking.
So it becomes a problem. As you mentioned, heart disease, it can make the heart become a bit more dilated as well.
I heard it's hard to see that people have heart disease when people drink. Is it true?
Oh, so typically when it moves to a certain extent, one of the classical ones would be a dilated kind of cardiomyopathy. But then picking up these things is not too difficult.
You can just abstain. It's not worth it. There are so many diseases we are prone to just by living anyway. You don't want to add all of that too. Now my cameraman here is asking what kind of alcohol is, so is it the gin, the hard ones, or just the beer, the Guinness? Please tell us, what kind of alcohol is okay, or are we just talking about all alcohol?
So that's very, very interesting question. I think we get that quite a lot as well. Because in our minds, we've kind of programmed ourselves that once I'm drinking gin, I'm drinking spirits, then that's when I'm doing alcohol. When I'm doing beer, then I'm not. And you see that, so that's how come we come back to what we calculate as units. Okay, so, and with that, we look into the percentage of the alcohol. So we come back to a baseline of units and we convert all of these to a unit. So based on the size of your beer and the percentage, the average size we tend to say 70 would usually equate to about a unit, about a tot would usually equate to about a unit. So essentially 8 grams of alcohol is equal to 1 unit. But then, so we do some calculations in mathematics based on the percentage of the alcohol you're taking and the volume you're taking, then we're able to convert that into the units, that standard units we're talking about, that we initially were saying for men 4 a day, women 2, and all of that, yes. But essentially, when we say alcohol, once it contains, it's fermented, it's been broken down to that bit, alcohol is alcohol. Yes, and maybe what you might be taking, because of the percentage, it might be a bit lower. But then if you do more quantities in terms of that lower one, so if you're doing more beers, you're doing 10 bottles of beers, compared to someone who might be doing a shot of whiskey, you're definitely doing more units than someone who is doing 1 shot of whiskey. So it contains the same thing, yeah, that maybe the branding and the coloring of it. And now we have it's easy now. There are sachets too, so you can get it in varied forms. But then essentially, what boils down to it is that it is alcohol in there. It would still have the same effect on your body. Just maybe the quantities for the various types might come into consideration. That's it.
See, you can't run away from mathematics. Wherever you are, there's calculations. You might think you are deceiving somebody, but there you go. Now, I want to find out something else. Some people say that there's alcohol in food. Fermented foods have alcohol. So whether I'm drinking or you're not drinking, I'm still taking some form of alcohol. How true is that?
Well, definitely that is true. So yes, the breaking down, or when we're taking something, it gets broken down. And so it might be broken into different components. So that's how we say that, yes, you might eat something that's fermented, or even when you're taking the metabolism, you would have some quantity. But those quantities are quite minute compared to when you're actually ingesting brewed, prepared alcohol. And mind you, the fact that you take alcohol doesn't mean you're going to necessarily fast all the time. Yes, generally appetite, oftentimes they come in malnourished as well, because the focus is really on the alcohol, and most people would kind of not eat as well due to the habits. Okay, so the brain kind of zones in, the craving is more for that. But even with that, you're still getting these other minute sources. And these other ones which you get from foods are not the ones we are discussing. We are talking about you taking in quantities that are prepared, in addition to what you normally would take. And these are the ones that would have the excess influence on the body as well.
So that argument is flawed. It's not in the food. Neither is it in the... Sometimes they say even medicine has alcohol, so... What are we talking about,
That's an interesting one. I'm not sure. Maybe herbal medicine definitely do have alcohol.
Yeah, but not our medicines from the hospital, so please. Yeah, either in or out. But
the red wine too is there. The red wine is good for you, so you should take some.
And they'll tell you, even the Bible says a little wine is good for the heart. So, I mean, in the end, it's your body. If you want to live long, healthy, with vitality, then make choices that would help you. That's really what matters. We're now going to delve into the diagnosis. Tell us about treatments, diagnosis.
Okay. So once someone comes in, the first aim is to actually diagnose if they do have a problem with alcohol. So based on the type of problem they're having. So if it's intoxication, or if it's withdrawal, if they're having what we call harmful use. So that one they're having harm physically or even with their mental health, and they are aware, but then they continue using, or if they're in the realm of dependence where they actually are dependent.
And we already talked about that.
We have talked about that as well. And even with the dependence to the severity of it as well. And we also try and assess the person's state of change. Okay. So essentially with that you're looking at, for example, someone might actually be having a problem. They are taking alcohol excessively. It's taking a toll. And you ask them, oh, do you think you're having a problem with alcohol? And they say, oh, no, not at all. So the person's oblivious to all that is going on with them. So that one, the person's not even thinking of it possibly having a problem. So that's one phase, pre-contemplation. There are those who might start thinking, this thing maybe is beginning to take a toll on my life. Maybe it's becoming a problem. So they are thinking it through. And there are those who have actually realized and decided that, no, this is definitely a problem. My home is shattered. I need to do something about it. So they've decided that there's a problem, I need to do something. Then there are those who will be at the stage where they are ready for action. So I have decided, but now I'm ready to do something about it. And then there are those who will be in recovery who have actually started that. And unfortunately, there's an aspect about the relapse because, as I said, it's a lifelong, it's with lapses and relapse. So even though people might stop, they might end up going back again and all of that. So these stages, we try and assess where the person fits into. So based on the person's stage of change, then you kind of plan your treatment along it. Someone who has no idea they have a problem kind of needs some assistance to begin to realize and to draw from them, they themselves to kind of internally kind of come to a realization that it is happening. Because it's not like you preaching them or telling them you do have a problem, but they also need to kind of wake up to that understanding. So it takes some amount of therapy to get there. For persons who are ready for change and are ready to act on it, then they are ready for things like detoxification. That means you would want to stop the ingestion. So initially, sorry, I forgot to mention, so at each of these stages, someone who's pre-contemplative, you might do with cutting down. So maybe you don't think it's a problem, but maybe it's a good idea to just start cutting down. So you do some other interventions while trying to wait to get them motivated to change. For persons who are ready to act, then the detoxification comes in. So you want to go off, but we understand that the body would react, will respond because it's not going to have it in the quantities and the way it was having it. And sometimes it can actually put one's life at risk, just those withdrawals in that intense phase. So based on the person's characteristics, sometimes it might be done in hospital, just trying to make sure that it's safe and that the person doesn't have any untoward outcome during that period of detox. So usually 10 days, 7 days or 10 days, the person will do detox. But then that in itself doesn't address the addiction or the substance use disorder. So that's just to help you with the withdrawals during the period where you're away from the alcohol, but it doesn't treat the disease of addiction at all. So some people come in and say, oh, I want detox, but thinking that once they detox, then they're kind of clean their system and now they are no longer having a problem with alcohol, but that is not the case at all. Detox is not equal to...
Now what you do during detox, is it like a water therapy? What exactly happens in detox?
Okay, so detox essentially is supportive therapy. So as I said, based on the level of someone's consumption, they might be at risk of having some side effects, so with symptoms during withdrawal. So some people might have diarrhea, some people might be vomiting, so they're losing large quantities of water. So you would want to rehydrate. And there are some complications you are concerned about. We've got to do with the brain and all of that. So sometimes we might give some multivitamins as well, trying to replace some nutrients or some vitamins that they have lost. And if it's not replenished, it has a high risk of causing very, very serious complications. So we want to be doing that. And then we'll try also to make it as comfortable as possible. So giving some sedatives as well. And trying to handle some, as I mentioned, some people might have seizures and all of that. So we are looking out for all of these things, managing them. So some will start even during the period and some will manage ad hoc. But the aim is to just support essentially the person through that period of going through the withdrawal.
And this is like a 10-day period?
Yes, so 7 days. Yes, so essentially you start some medication at a certain higher dose and gradually step down, and during that period too, so that's the aim during that period. Yes, so the aim is that by that time would have prepared the person to be well enough to then move to the actual phase of managing the disease of addiction, which is rehabilitation. So by that time, the person would have been talked to and would be ready for rehab. So detox is aimed at preparing somebody for rehab, which is the actual intervention for the disease of addiction. Yeah.
Let's walk us through the rehabilitation process.
Okay, so rehabilitation essentially is a period or a system essentially of trying to, one, help the individual unlearn certain things that they did when they were using the substance, and then trying to relearn, to learn better ways of handling these things. So there are different components of it. So essentially, apart from the person just drinking, as I said, it has a lot of influence on the person's behavior. So it begins to affect how the person behaves. And you mind you, they would have had a lot of impact with work, with home.
You have lost your work, lost your family, lost everything.
You know, so sometimes you have to now try and look at how to handle all of these things. So give you a period how to cope better, things with anger management, amongst others. All of these things are looked at. So it's a fully structured program, which is quite intensive. There are different modalities. Some of it is done on outpatient basis. So there are some that the person will have to have certain contact hours within a week. So you come from home to the rehab on the day and then kind of go back home. That's outpatient. And we have that available in Ghana. So Kolibu and Accra Psychiatry Hospital have that service. But that is not for just everybody. So it's for persons whose level of use is not really as intense, and they are highly motivated, you know, because going back home, you can easily have access again amongst others. So there's a time and place for that, and we assess to know who fits where and who can benefit from that. Some persons, once you try that, you know it's just water down the drain. It's not going to do much for them. Then we have the inpatient rehabs, and that there are quite a number in the country, both government institutions and public. So they have varied durations. Some research will say the longer the duration, the better. So we have some that are doing like 6 months of inpatients, you know, going through all of these stages of change, of treatment, okay? And it's quite intense with trained personnel, counselors, who are, so each individual have a counselor assigned to them to assess and then determine the treatment goals. And then individuals doing all of these intense sessions, you know, aimed at helping the individual to put their lives better in perspective and address some of these things that have been complications. So it's quite a well-structured program that's quite aimed at addressing not just you taking bottle to mouth, but the behaviors that would have come along with it as well, and how to learn to cope better and avoiding going back, you know, to the use after the period of the program.
So does it involve a lot of talks? Like, you know, the last time we were talking about therapy for some other condition. With alcoholism, is it also the case?
So majority of this is going to be done by verbal discussions among others. And it's actually, most of them are community, what we call community therapy. So it's, you have, it's a group of persons who have a similar disease.
So like the Alcohol Anonymous groups, so we have that in Ghana.
Oh yes, we have some Alcohol Anonymous groups in Ghana actually. And so most of the rehabs would have those sessions as well. They would have those sessions as well. But then AA meetings or Alcoholic Anonymous is not equal to rehab. Okay. So it's just kind of one of the components that is used in rehab. But then, so the aim is that there are other persons with similar issues in there, so you kind of support one another, you share, you learn, you know, you kind of help encourage one another as well. So it's not just persons kind of preaching to you, but then also yourself apply yourself in there. So that's how come we don't really force people into rehab.
You need to want it as much.
Yes, that's how you have to work at building motivation, because when people, generally the aim that has to be voluntary most of the times. Someone who is willing to do it will apply themselves in there. Of course, there are 1 or 2 cases where some people might be forced in, and whilst in there, they might get the motivation. For majority, once they're not really interested, they'll kind of just be wasting the money or wasting time and just making the entire environment not therapeutic for others who are really interested.
Because they can influence others negatively. Exactly. Now, talking about money, is it an expensive treatment?
Quality, you know that there's this good, fast, good, cheap. You can't get something that's fast, that's good, and then to be cheap. You can't get something, you know, so yes. Once you want good service and all the things that go in there, it doesn't run cheap. It doesn't run cheap, I'll be honest. We are having, generally, even with the government institutions, you wouldn't spend less than 2,000 a month for an inpatient for 6 months, you know. So it's going around that range. But definitely worth the investment once you have. That's what I'm saying. That if someone's not really motivated, exactly, it might be water. You might go through the 6 months. You might even do a year. Yeah. It's minimum 6 months actually, because if based on the level of progress. So someone who doesn't progress as well might do a bit longer. So if someone's not really motivated, they might be in there. Family might pay, but then they might not do as great.
I wish we could actually see these people.
And with the government, with the inpatient, so you do have some at Accra Psychiatry, you do have at Pantan Hospital. So that's a bit older where I am as well. And then there are a lot of private places. So the private would run more expensive, definitely, compared to the government. Yes, they are there, but it would be nice to have some more investment to kind of upgrade the structures. That at Pantan has really deteriorated because it's been there for years. It's actually been there way longer than the one. Fortunately, APH got theirs recently, so it looks nicer. So that is good. But we're hoping that more would come up and the old ones will also be refurbished to also give a therapeutic environment.
Please tell your politicians so they have to go and do something at one time. Because the issues keep rising, statistics will keep increasing. We can't just be, improving the new ones and leaving the old ones. So let's do that. And doctor has just told you where she is. So when you go there, just say you watched her on the show, and she'll give you a good treatment. This is Dr. Danswa. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, with all the information we are getting, why risk it? Why?
That aspect, you see, it's beyond just medicine. It becomes very dynamic because it is a cash. The business of alcohol is a multi-million business, So it's not just everyone thinking about just health. So adverts are very catchy. Have you watched a Guinness advert?
I know.
Michael Power. I mean, so there is a whole drive at getting people to get more in it because it's got different phases, different facets. So I think that once people are a bit educated, the important thing is keeping your health in focus and knowing when to say no, knowing when you're getting towards the line where it's getting a problem, and then getting help as soon as you can. And fortunately, we also do have services to help relatives of persons who are having the disease of addiction as well. So just as we have Alcoholic Anonymous, there's also one Al-Anon, but that kind of incorporates relatives as a family, anyone who's interested, and you can join these meetings. Now they're actually having a lot of virtual meetings as well. So you can join in, get to know, get to learn how you can help others who are having the disease.
So what's the general outlook of alcoholism and alcohol abuse in Ghana?
That is a big question. It's multi-tiered. There's only so much a doctor or a facility can do. It needs collaboration from different levels. You were talking about the school systems, you're talking about policy from the government or the decision-making level, policy making as well. So it's got a lot of layers to it. But I think once we are determined, definitely we can make
it starts from us, actually.
Exactly. So once we start, what you're doing here is great. Education, that's important. Once someone hears that and is able to at least make some better choices, that is, one life is a big deal. One life is like one family, it has a huge ripple effect. So it's a good place to start. But we're hoping that we can get all the other levels to step in as well. At our level of our institutions, cost is a challenge. And it becomes real in people's lives. There was recently a colleague called about a client they had been seeing, and this lady had come in multiple times with complications of alcohol use. This time she was in a lady, like severe complications of her alcohol use disorder. This time she had come in, she was having severe problems with brain, physical. It was difficult, and this wasn't the first time they were seeing her. They had seen her quite a number of times. And it's a disease of addiction, so it's not like just a matter of moral stuff. So when she goes on family things, why won't you just stop drinking this thing? It's caused so much, but it's beyond just her will. It's now a disease. The brain has a waste function structure. So she really does need rehab. But then she can't afford. Family can't afford. And so now we are trying to liaise with NGOs and see how we can try and raise support for her. But essentially, if we had a structured system, so you know some of these some of these things, because now it's at the point of life and death. Money shouldn't be the determining factor. You understand? So if we have some of these policies in there, it at least helps ease that. When people get serious problems with families, so you know, releasing such large sums of money for someone who would have done a lot of ill because of the disease of addiction is not easy. You know, easily they get shunned. And quite often,
I mean, this is alcohol abuse. It's not like you have a cancer or you have. You understand?
Most people think it's just your behavior.
Exactly. Yeah, it was a choice. You made this choice
so
yourself.
Most people think it's moral, but then it's not just a moral
beyond
thing.
that.
It is actually this. Like how you would have a heart disease, how you have a cancer, it's also an actual disease. And quite often, it might actually be linked with other substances as well. So most people will not even just stay with only alcohol. They might start off with alcohol, but even with a tolerance, so they might have to increase their dose quantity of alcohol, but sometimes they might actually introduce other substances to achieve that level of pleasure as well. So,
and we're talking about smoking.
There's a whole variety from your cannabis, your tramadol, your heroin, cocaine. I mean, the industry is booming. There are a lot of types in there as well. So it's quite complex, but we definitely can make way once we're talking about it and start making policies as well to support the recovery.
Because when you think about the cost it is to the individual, to society, to government, it doesn't make sense. And we should do something about it. Final words, Doc. I want you to go back on that frontal brain thing. I need that to drum home. If you don't remember anything at all, that should be what you remember, so that you know that, especially with the young ones, you need to be intentional about what you tell them, because it would affect the decisions they make going forward.
That's great. So yes, what I said was that as the brain develops, one of the last parts of the brain to actually fully mature and develop is the frontal aspect. That's the frontal lobe of the brain. So it's the very last. We have different sections, so it's the very last section to be fully matured compared to the other sections. And that is the center that has to do with the executive function, where the person's making major decisions, where the person is regulating themselves, you know, inhibiting themselves. It has a lot of functions, so we call it the executive center essentially. And once individuals start taking in these substances, it begins to affect, yes, there are different, I don't want to get too technical, but then it begins to affect that aspect as well as other parts of the brain as well. And so if these installs start before it's fully matured, then it becomes telling, because it begins to regress the level of its maturity, and then it might impact on the person's decisions further down the line. So that's how come some of these laws are about taking alcohol beyond a certain age, because they know by then you've actually had a fully matured frontal lobe, and then you can actually be a bit generally more stable with that regard. So yes, it does have an effect on that aspect.
You heard it yourself.
And our young ones are taking it before.
I mean, and once you start from there, nobody can help you. Nobody can help you. So please be advised. Please be advised. You've been watching us, and we've been talking about alcohol abuse and alcoholism. I trust you have learned a lot today. If you cannot remember anything, know that alcohol affects every part of your body, from the crown of your head to the sole of your feet. The complications are diverse, and you don't want that. Stay tuned next week, same time. Bye.